versus United States is based on the 1917 Espionage and Sedition Act, 1917-1918 Espionage and Sedition Acts. The Espionage Act essentially said you could not interfere with military operations or the war effort. It made it a crime to criticize the government or criticize the war effort. And the question in this case was whether or not people still had a right to free speech. What the standard that the court finds in Schenck versus United States, which is still applicable today, is that the government can suspend your free speech or your constitutional rights in a time of war or a time of if we're under threat, under attack, etc. Doesn't necessarily have to be a declared war. So if your words present a clear and present danger to the efforts of the United States or the defense of the United States, the government can suspend your constitutional rights. That has been used, as he said at the end, you can't say bomb on an airplane. After 9/11, if you uttered the word bomb in an airport, you were going to get tackled by the TSA, you were probably going to get interviewed by the FBI. It was a big deal because there was so much fear about another attack using airplanes. This still applies today. We're going to see this challenged a few times. We'll see it challenged during Vietnam with student protesters. But it still stands that if we are at a time of national emergency, you cannot just say and do whatever you want. The government does have the right to pause your civil liberties. World War I ends on November the 11th, 1918, which is known as Armistice Day. That is also now the current Veterans Day. We remember all U.S. veterans on November the 11th. It is not like a decisive battle where one side wins and the other side loses and that officially ends the war. It is the day that both sides just agreed to stop fighting each other. The significance of 1918. The significance of the end of the war, okay, you do need to know it's an armistice day, whatever, but here's what I need you to know and memorize forever until you die, okay? I need you to know the Treaty of Versailles. So if you haven't written that down, the Treaty of Versailles.
How do you spell that? Wait, hold on, wait.
I don't know.
It's okay, it's okay.
The Treaty of Versailles officially ends World War I, okay? Now, it is negotiated in France, in this place called Versailles, which is why it's unironically called the Treaty of Versailles. It ends the war with Germany. You need to know that Germany takes all of the blame. Okay, Germany takes all of the blame for World War I. Now remember, World War I broke out when a Serbian nationalist assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Okay, but Germany is going to take all of the blame for the war.
Why? Why did they do that?
It was to punish Germany because Germany had become so aggressive during the entire conflict. They were going after all their neighbors. Number 2, it recognized that the Allied powers had defeated the Central Powers. In other words, we wanted it in writing that we won. Okay, not us necessarily, but the Allied powers. I mean, that's fair.
That's like if you won participation, you wanted a medal for it.
Yeah. Number 3, I don't know if it's on here. It's not. You know what? We'll just go right into the Treaty of Versailles. No. Let's not get ahead. Number 3, Germany has to pay massive reparations. And reparations are just money that's essentially paid to repair the wrong that you've done. Okay, so in the case of Germany, they're going to owe the Allied powers an exorbitant amount of money. And to give you reference, they don't pay off the United States what they owe us from World War I until 2017, okay? They owe a ridiculous amount of money. The point of that,
How do you spell
reparations, R-E-P-A-R-A-T-I-O-N-S, reparations, yeah.
T-I-O?
NS?
Thank you.
The point of making Germany pay massive reparations was that it would severely limit Germany's economy, and it would be punitive enough that Germany would not want to go and attack its neighbors again. But turns out that plan didn't work out so well. For the negotiations, okay, when we're negotiating this treaty, Wilson has what he calls the 14 points. This is his peace plan, what he wants to see put in this peace treaty. And it's reasonable what he's asking for. What Wilson wants is that there will not be another world war. He wants this treaty to ensure that we can maintain world peace, that we can deal with the underlying conflicts that caused World War I to begin with, and that we can establish an alliance system that will prevent another conflict in the future. His 14 points, the main goals, these are things that you do need to know. He wants self-determination, okay? Self-determination. He wants any country that is currently a colony of another country should be able to determine for themselves what they want. If they want independence, give them independence. If they want to be a colony, let them be a colony. But he wants the people of those nations to be able to make that choice. Because it was the Serbians who did not want to be under the rule of Austria-Hungary that started this entire conflict, but the Serbians weren't the only ones. There were other countries, smaller countries in Europe that did not want to be colonies. There were colonies in Asia that did not want to be colonies. And so Wilson wants this self-determination. That way, you don't have a reason to fight. We'll just give you your freedom and independence. He wants freedom of the seas, okay? The ability to move goods across the globe without worry that you're going to be attacked by a country at war. He wants redistribution of colonies and territories, essentially, for the most part, giving independence to those colonies and territories. Germany is going to lose a lot of territory in this conflict, and that territory is going to be redistributed. One of the places that this redistribution happens that causes some major conflicts is in Africa. And Africa, essentially, the winners of World War I are going to go into Africa and carve it up for themselves and say, this is going to be our section, this is going to be our section, because they had resources that the different powers wanted. That conflict is probably better taught in a world history class, but does cause some destabilization in Africa. And the Africans have no say-so, okay? No say-so at all. He wants open diplomacy. By open diplomacy, he means he wants open channels of communication for countries to air their grievances, okay? If they have a problem with each other, you need to have a way that you can talk to each other, and you can do that through international cooperation. He proposes something called the League of Nations. And the League of Nations, the intent is to maintain world peace by opening up diplomatic channels for countries to negotiate with each other and to come to agreements when they disagree. In the negotiations, there are separate treaties that concluded with Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey. For Wilson, though, he goes to these negotiations, but then he gets very sick and he has to leave. So a lot of what he was asking for, a lot of his 14 points that these ideas he had to maintain world peace are not going to end up in the final treaty because he gets sick and he has to go back home. The Allied powers wanted to punish Germany pretty harshly. Wilson didn't think that that was a good idea. Wilson thought, sure, Germany should have to pay some kind of reparations for this, but we don't want to cripple Germany. If you cripple Germany, now you're putting them in a position where they have nothing to lose. However, the Allies are going to do it anyway. Austria-Hungary and Turkey are both divided into several new nations. Not super important for us. Germany loses its territorial possessions aside from mainland Germany, okay? Now this will be important for us when we get to World War II, because when we get to World War II, Germany is trying to reclaim a lot of these countries that had previously been part of the German Empire. Reparations, Germany is forced to pay $55 billion. In today's money, what would that be? Multiply by 10, 5.5 trillion or something like that. Super, super, super huge amount of money. And Germany is forced to take the guilt, which we talked about already, forced to take the blame. The other thing is, Germany can't have a military anymore. They're not allowed to have an army, they're not allowed to have a navy. They can only have a small police force, and I think they have to have less than, I believe it's 100,000.
Does this still go on today?
No. Oh no, Hitler came in and was like, make me. Make me.
Forgot about that thing.
Yeah. Okay. The League of Nations is established. You do need to know this. You need to write this down or keep note of it. The League of Nations is a peacekeeping organization. Okay. Well, hold on, Carson. Let's not put the cart before the horse. Okay.
Bars? Oh my goodness.
It is a peacekeeping organization. The goal is that if, all hell breaks loose, that the countries can come together and they can, work it out. Or if one country starts to get a little squirrely, like Germany, that the other nations can keep that country in check. That is the goal, okay? That is the goal.
So they tried interference and it didn't work out.
Well, here's the problem. The United States doesn't join, okay? We came up with the idea, but we don't join, and neither does Russia. Now, Russia exits the war in 1917, like smack dab when we're coming into the war. Russia's like, we're out, because they had an entire revolution, and they could not, what's the word I'm looking for? Not promise. They couldn't dedicate their troops to fighting in Europe when they were dealing with internal strife in Russia. So when the war is over, Russia's like, yeah, no thanks, we don't want any part of that. The United States doesn't join for one particular reason, and that is we don't want to get drawn into conflict. That's it. We just don't want to get drawn into conflict. A guy named Henry Cabot Lodge, who was the Speaker of the House or the head of the Senate, he was somebody important in Congress. He basically convinces Congress to vote no, to not join the League of Nations, because Washington had warned we don't need to get involved in European problems. If we get involved in European problems, they're going to draw us into every single war they ever have, and they're constantly fighting over there. So we decide we're not going to join the League of Nations, and we also do not ratify the Treaty of Versailles, okay? We do not ratify the Treaty of Versailles. For the same reason, okay? We don't ratify the treaty because we don't want to join the League of Nations. We're not agreeing to that. And that is the end of that. So we go back to being isolationist, okay? We're going to go back to taking care of our own business, paying attention to our own problems, dealing with our own stuff. And Wilson is going to work pretty hard, along with some other presidents in the 20s, to build a very strong American economy. And rather than focus on foreign policy and foreign issues, we're going to focus on us and what's happening here. We're going to kind of, like a hermit crab, like crawl back into our little shell. Return to isolation. Yep, we just talked about that. As far as our relationship with Europe, we're going to raise tariffs on goods coming from Europe. And those tariffs are going to cause some other problems that we'll talk about in the 20s, or actually the late 1920s. We're going to restrict European immigration. We're basically going to cut them off, okay, as much as we can, and just focus on ourselves. And for a little bit of time, this is going to benefit us a lot. But in the long term, our isolation is going to cause more problems than good. Our unwillingness to join the League of Nations is one of the biggest contributing factors to the outbreak of World War II. The tariffs that we put on pretty much the whole rest of the world in an attempt to isolate ourselves is going to cause some global economic problems that will lead to the Great Depression. And that is World War I. Questions? Thanks, I appreciate it. I'll be here for the rest of the year. Did y'all have any questions about the work you got yesterday?